Hey guys, this is MusicTechHelpGuy and welcome to part 3 of my pop rock mixing series in Logic Pro 10. In this video, we're going to continue working with the drums and work with the Channel EQ plugin. We'll also cover the fundamentals of equalizers in case you're unfamiliar using them. In the previous videos, we already set some levels and pan on the drums, so let's give them a listen. So they sound good, but since this is a pop rock track, we really want the drums to be quite a bit brighter and pop out in the mix better, especially the kick and the snare. So let's start with the kick in mic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the channel EQ to the effects insert right here. It's under EQ, channel EQ. So we'll pull that up. First, let me go over just the basics of EQs as quick as I possibly can. Equalizers essentially allow you to boost or to cut, or attenuate is the fancy term, signals anywhere in the frequency range, or the audible frequency range. So that's 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. This is done in 3 ways. It can be done with bands like this, like a band like this, shelves, a shelf like this, or maybe a shelf like this, or filters, which look like this, or this. So done in 3 ways, with a band, a shelf, or a filter. Now, the channel EQ has 4 bands. They're right here, 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 and here. 2 shelves, here and here. And 2 filters, here and here. Let me reset this back to the default setting. You just go up to the preset menu up here and go down to Recall Default. There we go. So let me talk about the bands and shelves first, and we'll talk about their 3 main parameters down here, and then we'll talk about filters and their parameters down here. So bands and shelves, again, have 3 parameters. You have the center frequency, which is the top parameter here. If you drag that left or right, you can choose the position of your boost or attenuation. You have your boost or cut amount, often called the gain, so you can pull that up to boost the signal. You can pull it down to cut the signal. And then the bottom option is called Q, like just the letter Q, and it stands for quality, but it controls the bandwidth of the band. So let's say, for instance, I want to make these the kick drum a little brighter. I want to boost it around the, I don't know, we'll say the 10K range, so we can boost that up. If I want this to be sort of more of like a broadband boost that happens, that's a little more noticeable, we could lower our Q down to 0.1, which is a very wide band, band, and then I can pull it down and I can make it more of like a little notch. So this is the Q. It controls the bandwidth. So again, center frequency, gain, and Q, the 3 main elements of any band or shelf in an EQ. The difference between a band and a shelf is really very simple. A band just basically boosts the signal, and then it's like within a range, you know, so this doesn't continue to be boosted. A shelf boosts the signal or cuts the signal and continues to boost or cut the signal. So you'd use a shelf when you want to maybe cut all frequencies above a certain point or below a certain point, or boost all frequencies above a certain point. You're going to use a band most of the time when you just want to, you know, cut or boost things within a certain frequency range. All right, so next let's talk about filters. The channel EQ has 2 filters, one here, you can pull it out there, and one right here, and we'll pull that one in as well. Now, there's 2 main types of filters, low pass filters and high pass filters. Now, there's other types of filters beyond that, but in most EQs, those are the only 2 types you're really going to see. The word pass literally means allow. So when you say something like low pass filter, that means you're allowing low frequencies but cutting high frequencies. So this upper filter here, and the terminology gets confused sometimes, but this upper filter is a low pass filter because it cuts the highs but allows the lows to stay. So it's a low pass filter. This bottom one here is a high pass filter because it allows the highs but cuts the lows. So let me go back to just the default here. Let's kick in this one. And let's talk about the 3 main parameters of our filters, because they're different than the 3 parameters of our bands and shelves. the top value is called not the center frequency, it's called the cutoff frequency. And it's a little bit different than the center frequency of our bands, because the actual cutoff is not on the 0 dB line with the center with the center frequencies. It's actually where the signal's already been attenuated by 3 dB. So that's the center frequency, or the cutoff frequency, but it's similar to center frequency in that it does position where the filter goes. The second option here is called the slope. And it essentially, when you pull it, you can pull it up or you can pull it down. It controls the steepness or gentleness of the slope. So what it's showing you is, like right here, we have 48 decibels of attenuation per octave. So it's a much steeper slope. Something like 6 dB is going to be much gentler low-end reduction. So you're going to actually find in a lot of our tracks here, we're going to be cutting a lot of the low end very steeply to sort of prevent low frequency buildup when we go to finalize the song. So, but we're not there yet. So, but we will be doing this along the way. Now, the last element is not called Q anymore. It's called resonance. What resonance does is it actually boosts the frequency just before the cut. Resonance is essentially just feedback in the circuit. It's feedback at the cutoff frequency. So again, it allows you to add a slight boost just before the cut. So if you want a little bit more mid-range here right before we cut all the bass out, you can do that. Likewise, with our low-pass filter here, we can do the same thing. We could maybe say, okay, I want to cut at around 10K, but I also want to boost the signal up to 10K and then cut it out. So that's filters. So again, bands, shelves, filters, and there are 3 parameters. Now there's 2 ways you can adjust each band, shelf, or filter within the channel EQ. You can do it the way I've been doing it, where I'm just sort of grabbing the parameters down here, dragging them left and right or up and down, depending on what you're trying to adjust. Another way to do it is to simply click on the center frequency or cutoff frequency of the band or shelf, and you'll get this sort of visual where you can pull this horizontal line up and down to control your boost or cut. You can grab the center frequency to pull it left and right, and you can grab these vertical lines to adjust the Q. The same thing goes for the shelving EQs. You can boost or attenuate, you can adjust the center frequency, and you can also adjust the shape or the Q of the shelf. And you can also do the same thing with your filters. You can pull the filter in or out. You can adjust the slope, and you can also adjust the resonance. So that's just the basics of EQ in general. Let's jump into using the channel EQ practically within our mix. All right, so I've got a blank channel EQ up here with just the default setting, and I've just soloed out the kick in mic. Let's just start with that mic. Let's see what it sounds like by itself. Now, we can sit here and try to listen to it all day and try to figure out audibly what we need to do with it, but one of the cool things that channel EQ has within it is an analyzer. You just click on the analyzer button right here, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to hear the pre and post EQ, or see a pre or post EQ analysis of the recording. So if I hit play now, it actually shows us visually what we're working with. Now, if this is in post mode, any booster attenuation I make is going to show in the analysis. So I just boosted 2500 here by plus 24. And you can see it's in the analysis now. In pre-EQ or pre-EQ analysis, that's not going to show up. By the way, you can option click on any of these parameters to set them back to default. So let's put this on post mode. What I typically like to do with kick drum, because I want this to really pop out, is I like to boost the high end quite a bit. I'm not going to use a shelf though. I'm going to use a band here. It's like the mid-high range there. Let's adjust the Q so it's a little more narrow. I like to put like a little 1 to 2K little bump in the signal just for a little bit more pop. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll pull this all the way up, make the band real narrow, and I'll sweep it around while it's playing and find a sound that I kind of like that's tolerable, but then pull that that pop down. And then I'll just make this a little less narrow and a little less present. Now, another trick that I actually learned from a drummer was if you want your drums to really be poppy and punchy and stand out and not ring so much, is pull out the 500 hertz range, which I'm going to do. We're going to find that we do this to a lot of the drums. Pull out 500, not quite that narrow though. Just sort of pulls, so it pulls some of the ring out, but it also, I find it pulls the woodiness, the boxiness out of it. And then what I'm going to do is with my lowest band, I'm going to boost the low range quite a bit just to get a little more bass beefiness out of it. And the thing about the kick drum, and this is something I always tell my students, is the kick drum, don't think about it as a bass drum. Think about it as a kick drum. You want to hear more of the snap of it and less of the thud or the woofiness of it. Really, the woofiness of your mix is going to be in the bass guitar or bass synth or whatever's down there. So I'm not saying completely filter out the low end of the kick, but I do like to filter out a little bit of the sort of sub-low end on the kick. So let's see what this sounds like, and then I'll A-B it by clicking on the bypass button up here. We can hear it without and then with. So here's with. Cool, that's got a lot more punch to it, a lot more slap to it. And it's a less boxy, a little fuller, and it's even a little deeper, even though we pulled out some of this low end. Before, it was just kind of bland and boxy sounding. All right, so let's move up to the kick out track. The kick out, like I said before, is some sort of Neumann BCM model mic that was about a foot and a half away from the kick drum. So we're actually going to be picking up a little bit of drum kit from the room in this track. But usually what I like to do with kick out is make it just sort of like the subbiness of the kick drum. I like to make the kick in more of the punch and the out mic more of like a the subbiness, the low end of the kick. So let's listen to this. Yeah, I'm gonna, again, filter out the low end a touch, really boost the low end with our low end shelf here. I'm gonna pull out, I may not do this on this track. I'm gonna pull out 500, just a touch, pull up the mid-high range, but then I'm gonna filter out all this high end, because I don't wanna hear all that hi-hat and cymbal in that mic. So I guess keeping 500 in or not is gonna depend on how much of the snare I really want to have in there. Let's hear both the kick in and kick out together. Yeah, it sounds pretty good. One of the things that you're going to find when you EQ is when you start boosting frequencies, though, you do sometimes risk clipping or increasing the overall volume of your track. So one thing I didn't show you, I'm going to go back to the kick in here because the kick in is really getting pretty close to clipping, is there's an output gain control here that allows you to take your whole EQ signature that you've created and pull it up or pull it down. So I'm actually going to pull down the kick out quite a little bit. Well, actually not quite a bit, just like 3 dB, just to compensate for some of these boosted points I've created. And you'll find that I'll do that with a lot of my EQ. I'll add the EQ and then I'll take the gain down just a touch, just to keep that track from sounding too much louder. Cool, let's move on to the snare top. I like the big woody boxy sound of that snare, so I'm going to try to keep that, but I'm also going to try to brighten it up a little bit more so it smacks a little harder. Yeah, with snare drum, there's no reason for anything in the bottom range here to be there, so let's scoop out like 100 hertz and lower. Let's pull up the high end with the high end shelf. pull out 500 just a touch. And I like my snare drum to be real, like, full sounding, so I actually will boost the sort of mid-low range here a little bit. And let's try boosting the 2500 range a little bit here. I'll sweep this around and find a good little just presence peak in there for it. All right, cool. There is a lot of hi-hat in there though, so may have to do some things later to take that out. Let's take a listen to the snare side. Yeah, it's pretty low in the mix. Yeah, because there's slightly less hi-hat in this one, I'm going to take advantage of boosting the high mid-range up here a little bit more than I would do in the top mic, just because the top mic, any high-end boost I do is going to end up boosting the hi-hat as well. I think I am going to pull out the high-end though with the filter. Let's pull out 500 as well. I actually kind of like pulling out 1K here. Just gives it more of a focused sound and less of a out of control in the upper range or mid-range sound. Cool. Now again, keep in mind all these are going to be blended together later, so I'm thinking ahead and not trying to oversaturate the high end or the low end too much, which is why I'm using a lot of filters. So let's listen to kick and snare together. Yeah, with the EQ on, we've got a little bit more focused sound, a little more pop to it. I will say with the EQs off, they do sound a little more natural, but that's not really what we're going for here. We want them to be poppy and punchy. Before I get to the toms, I'm going to go to the overheads and the room mics, just because this pattern here, the main pattern, doesn't really have any toms in it. So let's listen to the overheads. All right, so for the overheads, it's picking up the whole drum kit, but it's mainly to pick up the hi-hat and the cymbals and sort of some of the far away tone of some of the drums. So typically what I do with overheads is I do sort of like a softer low end cut. I'll boost up the high end quite a bit with a high shelf here. That's really just to bring out the sizzle of the cymbals. I'm going to try cutting 500 as well, just a touch. Again, I may undo that. And then just throw a little presence peak in here, somewhere around 1 to 2K, and I'll sweep that around and I'll see where I like it. So let's just play that and I'll see where I like this presence peak at. Yeah, actually I like it up at like 2850. It's doing some nice things for the sizzle and the snare drum, the brightness in the snare drum. So again, this is without it. And then with it. So it's got a nice little lift to it. All right, let's take a look at the rooms. So remember, these are a pair of Royer mics in a Blumline configuration about 10 or 12 feet away from the kit. Let's see what we can do with these. We don't want to destroy the sound of them being like a room mic. Like, we don't want them to be a second cymbal mic. We really want them to sound like a room mic. So typically what I do is I band pass them, which means throwing in both a high end, a high pass and a low pass filter. It also keeps the high frequencies from the overheads and the rooms from interacting with each other in a bad way phase-wise, because high frequencies tend to have more phase issues than low frequencies. And that little presence peak is just for the to bring the snare out. Let's pull 500 down a touch. We may not actually use this though. Yeah, it's destroying the snare drum when I do that. Let's actually boost the low end just a touch. Just maybe we'll get a little bit more subbiness from the kick drum if we do that. Yeah, it brings out the snare or the kick drum just a little bit. So let's hear the overheads in the room stereo. Yeah, a little more snap to them. Let's hear those with the kick and snare in as well. Cool. A little more pop to them. Now, let's jump up to the hi-hat. Now, the hi-hat's barely going to be in the mix at all, and it's pretty much all high end. So what I typically do with hi-hat is I cut all the low end out, all the way up to like the highest frequencies. And then I just boost the high end a little bit just to get some sizzle. And that's pretty much it. If this is like a jazz record or something where there's a lot of more intricate hi-hat work going on, then I'd probably EQ it a little bit differently, but the hi-hat mix is barely in there to begin with. All right, room mic. This is room mono. Now this is I believe it's a Mojave MA200 tube mic that we tucked in a corner somewhere, and I like to do this and sort of cut most of the low end on it, or the high end on it rather, and make it almost like a second kick out mic, almost like a boominess, like a low end boosting mic, like a body mic. So here's what it sounds like with nothing on it. It even brings out the snare drum quite a bit. So let's, with our low pass filter, pull up quite a bit of the high end. Let's actually use this opportunity to actually play with the resonance a bit. So I'm putting it right where the snare drum is showing in the analysis. So I'm boosting some of the subbier tones down here in the 50, 60, 70 hertz range. And let's see what all of that sounds like together now. All right, so I went back and just adjusted a few of the levels there just to dial it into taste. Now let's check out our toms. I gotta find a spot where the toms are actually being used. Let me just hit X to hide the mixer. At the very end, there's a really cool tom fill that I want to go over to and loop here. I think it's actually there's two of them. There's one right here, and there's another fast one right here. So let's listen to that with the toms in. Yeah, I mean, really, my only trouble with the toms is that they're kind of mid-range and bland sounding. I want them to have a little more low end and a little more bite to them. So let's just solo out just the tom. Actually, just do tom 1. Yeah, let's go over to channel EQ here. Let's actually use a preset for this. Let's go under drums, go to tom EQ. No, I wouldn't use that at all. So some of these EQs, let's see, tom EQ high. That's kind of boring. It's kind of bland. Let's do tom medium. That's more like what I would do. I'm gonna do a high-end boost, a mid-range cut around 500, and then a little bit of a low-end boost. So let's take this preset. I'm gonna cut out the low end, move this down a bit. Actually, first let's actually watch it because I want to see where the low end actually is in the tom before the EQ. Yeah, so it's around 100 hertz. So I'm going to boost it just below 100 hertz. Sometimes if you boost just slightly below the peak, it'll give it a little more subbiness. If you boost it right on it, it just becomes a little bit too much. And if you do above it, it becomes a little too woody and mid-range sounding. So we'll do a little bit below 100, cutting out the low end. I'm going to move this down to 500. And I'm going to keep this high-end shelf, but I'm actually going to add sort of a mid-high range bump. Let's see what that sounds like and put this back in post mode. Here's without. Yeah, let's do that. Let's copy that same setting. You just hold Option and drag the plugin over to tom 2. Let's see what that sounds like on tom 2. Now I want to change this up from tom 1 to tom 2 a little bit. So I'm going to pull the filter down a little further. I'm going to pull the low end boost down a little further. And I'm going to change this presence peak to something else. Actually like that, but I'm going to roll out this shelf a little bit more. Actually, I pulled out the shelf completely. So that's a good start. Let's listen to all of the drums now. And let's just play out the end of the song here. Cool, so let's A-B that with and without all the EQ. So this is with the EQ. One thing I will say is I think the snare drums got just a little bit too much high-end boost to it. It's starting to sound kind of fizzly. I'm starting to like the way the snare drum sounded before in the high range. So let me just pull some of this out. And part of that's probably going to be because of the overheads too. Let me pull this out. One of the things you want to make sure you don't do too much in your mixes is don't boost 1 to 5K too much, because that is one of the frequencies that your ears are most sensitive to. So in a lot of ways, if you boost that frequency range too much, it can make the recording sound oversaturated. Cool, I like that a lot better. It's a little more organic. Let's pull all the drums just down a touch. I'm just doing that to make sure that my master fader doesn't clip. All right, the last thing we gotta do is just those snaps. I mean, they're technically not drums, but they are sort of percussive, and they're helping the beat. Yeah, not much really going on frequency-wise with the snaps, but there is this little low-end bump down here, so let's pull that out completely. Simple enough. We'll just go with that. So let me go back to the beginning. I'll turn everything on, or just the drums on. Let's see what that sounds like for a few bars. Yeah, I like the way the kick drum's sounding. It's not as muffled sounding anymore, but there's still some problems with the mix that we're going to address in the next couple videos, or some problems with the drums in the mix in the next couple videos. One is in the next video, we'll talk about adding compression and gating to the drums to sort of make them a little more poppier dynamically, not just from a frequency standpoint. And then the following video will do some drum sample layering to tuck some drum samples underneath the kick and the snare drum and maybe even the toms to really, really fatten up the drums and really make them pop in the mix. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please remember, if you'd like to follow along with me and mix this song along with me, I'll provide a link in the video description below where you can download and purchase this exact same multi-track session that I'm working with. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, if you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel to see multiple new videos added every week. Also, you can check out carneymediagroup.com where you can view all of my video tutorials, search for specific topics, download the videos ad-free, and in some cases you can purchase session content so you can work along with me in the video. Also, please consider giving a monthly contribution at patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy. As always, thanks for your support and thanks for watching.